Hello, it's Shari. Today I'm making a fall themed gratitude card with these cute little mice and that huge cup of hot chocolate or coffee. So I'm using some mice and the leaves from the You Autumn Knows stamp set. I'm also using leaves from the Scripty Autumn Sentiments, and that is also where my sentiment will come from. And then I have used this little pumpkin here from Happy Harvest. So I've already stamped all my images in some jet black ink on Nina cardstock, so it's Copic friendly, and I'm going to color them with my Copic markers. I'm coloring both my mice in different colors. I like to kind of mix it up so that all these mice don't look exactly the same. And this is a really fun color combination to use. These are the E70s, and I just think this is a really nice brown, but it also has like a taupey grayishness to it. It's one of my favorite ones to use. So I've just colored him with two shades of that, and then for his belly and his ears I'm going in with some really light browns and some pink. I'm going to do the same for the belly and the ears on the second mouse, but for him I'm not going to use the same grays. I'm going to go in with some warm grays on him. So again, I'm only using two colors. I'm putting in my shadows first, and then I'll go in with the lighter color and blend it out. It's really fun to use all your grays and browns when coloring these little mice. So now I'm going to move on to my leaves, and I'm starting with this largest one here, and I'm doing this one in some reds. So I've got my darker color, that R27, that I put towards the center, up kind of the spine of the leaf, or the major vein of the leaf in the middle. And then I'm going in with my lighter color and kind of pulling that out. I'm going to do the same on this smaller leaf, again starting with my darker up the center, and then I will blend it out with that lighter. And then I can go back in with the darker and kind of darken it up if I feel like I've blended it out too much, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back in with that dark and just sort of trace up that spine that's in the middle. I'm going to color one more leaf in these red colors, one of those little ones, so each of those little ones is going to be a different color. Just a little bit of the dark and then blend it out with the light, and then back in just for some shadow. Now I'm moving on to my yellow leaves, doing the same technique. I've got two yellows here. One is much darker than the other. And I'm using this lighter one to blend it out. I did feel like this was slightly too light. It wasn't kind of the bright yellow that I wanted. So I have switched it out for my Y35 that's sort of in the middle of the two that I had. So this one will be a bit brighter. And then I'm just tracing over the veins of the leaf with that R38. So I'll go in and color one of these small leaves in the same way. So I have a small yellow leaf. And then the last leaves I'm going to color in orange. So the standard fall colors of red, orange, and yellow. Again, starting with that darker one towards the center and then the lighter one out on the edges. And then I'm just going back in with the dark again. I'll do the same for that little leaf, just like I did for the others. Kind of doing dark on that little rounded bottom to the leaf and then up the center. And then I'm using those same oranges for my pumpkin. For this one, I'm kind of doing my shading backwards. I'm going to color my light color first, and then I'm going to go in with the dark and pull it up from the bottom, kind of in that rounded shape of the pumpkin. Give it that rounded look. And then of course, just add a little bit of green for the stem. So I'll use the coordinating dies and cut out all these images. Here they are. And I'm just going to put them aside in this little bowl. And then I'm going to work on my cup. I'm using some of the pattern paper from the Sweater Weather collection for my outside in stitch mug, and then I'm going to use the stitched cupcake die set for the whipped cream that I'm going to put on top. So I've just cut that out of some vanilla malt cardstock. And then for the cup, I'm just going to line it up. I like that the pattern goes up and down. You could also make it go across. And then I'm going in with some green ink and just darkening up the edges a little bit. This is Lucky Clover Distress Ink. I'm using my blending brush. And this just kind of defines that cup a little bit more and gives it a little more dimension than just a flat die cut piece of paper. So I switched over to my blending foam because I can add a lot more green quickly. But you'll see that I'll go back and forth between the two. So when I need it a little bit softer to kind of pull that ink in, I'll switch back over to the brush. And I'm doing all the sides to this, not just the sides, but also the top. And you can see that sort of makes it pop a little bit more, just defines things a little bit better. For my sentiment, I'm using the Scripty Autumn Sentiment stamp set, and I'm going to heat emboss that large word gratitude. So I've just got a piece of red cardstock and I've put some anti-static powder on there. I'm inking it up with my clear embossing ink, making sure I get really good coverage. And then I'm going to dunk this into my white embossing powder and get that white embossing powder all over that stamped word. Then I can heat it up with my heat tool, and that's going to melt and you get that nice bright white sentiment on that red cardstock. Then I'm going to take the coordinating die that cuts out this word, and then I'm going to get this really cool die cut sentiment to add to my cup. Now for the rest of my sentiment, I'm going to stamp it directly onto the mug. So I've got that word gratitude sitting there just as a placeholder so that I can arrange the stamps that go above and below it in the right spot. So once I've got those in place, I can close my MISTI door and pick them up, remove that gratitude die cut, and then I'm going to white emboss these on that mug so that they stand out just like the die cut sentiment. So I'm adding my clear embossing ink, stamping those down, and then I'm going to add my white embossing powder. I'll just heat that up with my heat tool till I melt that embossing powder just like before. And now you have this really bright sentiment that really stands out. I did reinforce my cup since this was pattern paper instead of cardstock with a piece of cardstock behind it, just to kind of give it a little more stability, especially since I had heated it with my heat tool. And then I'm adding that die cut word gratitude just with some liquid glue right between those other lines. So now I'm going to work on my card base. This is a kraft cardstock card base, and I'm going to ink up the edges and define those edges a little bit, just kind of darken them up. It just gives more interest to the card. I'm using tea dye ink with my blending brush to kind of pull that color in from the corners. You can see how that kind of gives it that vignette sort of look. And for this, I want kind of a lighter look. I don't want too much ink on there. So that's why I'm using my blending brush to just kind of build up the ink so I get that look that I want. Now I'm going to make a little ground for my mug to sit on. I've got some ground coffee cardstock and I'm using one of the Simple Stitch Hillsides to create a little rounded top ground for this mug to sit on. I'll just adhere that right along the bottom of my card. And then this will give a place for that mug to go without it just floating up in the air. I'm going to go ahead and add my whipped cream by putting a little bit of liquid glue right along the bottom, and then I'll just lay this here and layer my mug right on top. So I want to make sure that I kind of cover up all that little bumpy part at the bottom so that it looks like it's down inside that mug. And then I'm adding my leaves to decorate. I thought it would be cute for there to be one sitting sort of on top of the whipped cream. And then this little mouse, he is about to jump in or he's sliding down the whipped cream. I don't know, whichever way you want to look at it. I just think it's kind of fun that he's hanging out in the cup. So now that I've got those pieces on, I can put foam all over everything. And then I can center this up right in the middle of my card. So now I'm able to go in with all those other leaves that I colored and that other cute little mouse and add those around the bottom of the card. So I've tucked that first leaf in there on the left. I've put my little mouse in front. I added some foam underneath him so he's kind of popped up. Taking that really big red leaf and putting that on the right side. Just kind of making an arrangement like you set this mug down in a bunch of leaves that have fallen on the ground. For the pumpkin, I'm going to pop it up as well, adding some foam along the bottom. And then the top of it will just sit on that mug, so I'll add some liquid glue. And I just thought that the pumpkin just added a little bit extra. Maybe this is a pumpkin spice latte that these mice are hanging out on. And then I'll continue in with some of these smaller leaves, sort of tucking them in, and just filling in this space to make it look nice and full. So the one nice thing about this mouse and this mug being popped up, as you can see, I'm taking this red leaf and I'm tucking it up underneath all that. So it kind of gives me some leeway to arrange my leaves the way I want. And then I thought it needed a little bit more, so I'm going to make some leaves around my mug. So I'm taking my dough ink, which this is my favorite ink to use on kraft cardstock to make sort of this tone-on-tone look. And I'm just stamping these leaves, kind of making a frame around the mug. So you can see I'm stamping them off the side. And this is just going to go around those edges rather than completely covering the whole card, which I think has a different kind of look. So it's not like it's pattern paper, but it's almost like these leaves are falling down around in the background. Once I've got all those leaves kind of stamped where I want them, I'm going to go back in with those little dashed and dotted swirlies like the wind blowing around and just kind of fill in a little bit more. I like using smaller images to fill in between larger images, and this one's really fun even though it's not a smaller image necessarily. It is a lighter image, I would say, because you get those really fine dots and it just adds this really subtle detail between all those leaves. It is a little bit difficult to stamp around the mug because it's already stuck down. So I'm just being very careful to make sure that I don't get any ink on the things that are already down on this card. So you can see I'm kind of stamping those swirls so they're coming in from the sides. And then now I'm going to embellish my leaves with some glitter because every card needs a little bit of glitter, right? So I'm using my Stardust stickles and I'm just adding a little bit of glitter to the leaves. I'm not completely covering them, just kind of giving them a highlight, a little bit of glitter on the top of that pumpkin as well. And then I felt like I still needed a little bit more in this pattern in the background. So I'm using a Copic marker that's kind of the same color as my dough ink, and I'm just making tiny little dots to fill in. This would also be good with like a little heart stamp or something else that you might have in your stamp stash. And then finally, I'm taking one of those little leaves and adding it to this little mouse's hand. He's just waving it in the air. He is super happy, and I just think that's so cute. And of course, I'll add some glitter to that leaf to match. And then here is my finished card. I think this is a really fun card, a great way to use that stitched mug die to kind of fill it and give these mice something fun to play on. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.